That's right. You are listening to Ida History, the podcast. I'm one of your hosts, Jeff Wade, and I'm looking into the deep, beautiful blue eyes of my co host, Mr. Mark Iverson. What's up, Mark?
They call me the Blue Beauty, or the Blue-Eyed Beauty, Jeff. But just ready to talk a little bit Ida history, and my name is Mark Iverson.
Yes, it is. So, Mark, for our first episode, we want to do something a little fun because we're going to be talking about some heavy topics here soon. So, we just kind of wanted to break the ice a little bit, as it were, with some more kind of off the wall kind of topics. Most of our episodes that we will do will be somewhat of a narrative storytelling, tell one story from start to finish. But this time we're going to tell a series of shorter stories, kind of, right? So we came up with a good list. What did I write? Okay, I got it. So we came up with a good list of stories for our first run, but we felt like we wanted something a little more foundational, right? To start with. We wanted to, we thought about sitting here and, we could drone on and on about fur trappers and gold rushes, but that's not really entertaining. So, Mark, why don't you tell the good people what we're up to?
Well, folks, we're here to talk about VD. The more you know, the more you and the ones that you love are protected.
Mark, dude, that's the wrong podcast.
Wait! This isn't Poor Choices, the podcast for impulsive middle-aged men.
That's your other show. No, this is Ida History Podcast, Mark.
Oh, a bit of VD back in the old days in Idaho was rather run-of-the-mill. But, nope, we're not going to talk about VD, unfortunately. We'll save that for the prostitution episode, I guess. But anyway, I got mixed up. Oh, shit.
Okay. So then, Mark, what are we going to talk about?
Well, in that case, we're going to talk about fun, interesting, and at times controversial topics focusing on Idaho's historical roots. Our topics range from whether or not Lewiston should be the capital of Idaho to if Boise sits atop a network of tunnels dug by the city's Chinese population long ago. So, what do we have to get us started, Joffrey?
Oh, I have to go first?
Yes, Jeffrey.
Dang it. Well, hope I don't screw this up. Mark, actually, I'm going to call an audible. I'm not going to follow the list that we have going here. And I'm actually going to talk about the name of Nampa, Idaho.
Oh, snap.
I think is a good one. Hopefully I can do it justice. I actually don't even have notes written out for this one, but I covered this story on my tour, the Macabre History of Nampa walking tour, so I think I can do this properly.
I like the little train going up the hill. I think I can. I think I can.
Yes.
Go, Jeffrey.
Just got to get in that frame of mind. I'm out there. It's cold. I'm freezing. It's raining. Okay. I'm good. So, the myth on this one, Mark, is that the city of Nampa, Idaho, was named after a Native American chief. Chief Nampa, right?
Yeah.
You've heard this one before, right?
I've heard many people swear by this story.
They will swear up and down that this is the name of the city. So that's kind of the I guess that's so I'm gonna kind of lay out some facts for you right now, Mark. So going back to about 1919, there was a guy who was a pretty popular guy here in Nampa, Idaho. His name was Fred Mock. Fred Mock was a booster of Nampa. He was a businessman. He owned the Bank of Nampa. He helped do some surveys for the railroads down to Silver City. He helped with the telegraph lines. He did a lot of work for the city itself. So when it came to the Harvest Festival in the year of 1919, he and a couple of other businessmen in town were looking to boost attendance to the Harvest Festival. Now, Mark, you've probably heard of this Harvest Festival, but they don't call it the Harvest Festival anymore. Now they call it the Snake River Stampede, so that's how that got its start.
What do they harvest at the Snake River Stampede?
belt buckles, I guess.
Do they yield the corn? Do they make corn bracelets?
They must. But back in 1919, like I said, they were trying to find ways to get more people to come to the Harvest Festival. So they were looking around, and they decided to bring Chief Nampa back to Nampa so he could tell his war stories and talk about life here in this area before the white man arrived. So they did this. Chief Nampa arrived in town the morning of the Harvest Festival. They built him like a big teepee downtown, and he sat in his teepee. He had the peace pipe going, passed the peace pipe around.
That sounds racist as fuck.
It is very racist, Mark. And then he would walk around town, in his Native American dress, and his all of his counselors were there, and his can I say squaws? I don't think I can say squaws, can I?
Well, it used to be just a word, but I think now we learned that that's a pretty shitty word. But I'm not sure.
I'm just gonna not say it.
Let's talk to our PC police. Do you want to?
Not feeling it?
I don't know, man. I think from the beginning.
But Mark, it turns out that Chief Nampa was actually Fred Mock, this old white dude wearing a wig and traditional-ish Native American, I should actually say stereotypical-ish Native American dress. So there was really no Chief Nampa. This story was actually created whole cloth back in 1919, which was quite a few decades after the town of Nampa was created. And I actually am holding in my hand a letter that proves my claim. You ready for this?
I am.
So this letter was written to Fred Mock from Fred W. Wilson of the chairman of the Nampa Harvest Festival. And it basically says, "Dear F.G. Mock," and then underneath that it says, "Dear Chief." Kind of suspicious, huh?
Yeah.
Or sus, as my kids say.
Sus?
It's very sus.
What is that?
It's short for suspicious.
Oh, shit. I was I thought hot sauce or something.
These damn kids.
Kids. Fucking kids.
Right. So it says, "Dear F.G. Mock," and then, like I said, underneath, "Dear Chief, in connection with our annual Harvest Festival for this year, the matter of attractions other than those you pay your bit for have been under consideration. Many ideas have been suggested, and many with merit. We have decided that a stunt, new and different than anything we have ever tried before, would be to seek out and find the Chief Nampa. The committee discussing this event seems to think that Fred Mock knows where he is hidden and suggests that the said Fred G. Mock take unto himself a suitable assistance and go find the, in quotation marks, chief."
Was that Evil Knievel, man? Because I'm pretty sure he jumped some shit around here,
man.
buddy.
Did you hear that his son just passed away?
Rest in peace, Robbie Knievel.
Yep. Damn.
Jumping shit in heaven.
Yep. So... And then he goes on to talk about how the chief should bring his counselors and have them all dressed in typical Indian garb, and with the basis, basically work out this idea. And then he signs off as saying, "If not imposing on good nature, won't you think this idea over and help us out on this event? We all feel that you are the best man fitted in the community to do this, and your cooperation in the matter will, I assure you, be appreciated by the committee and the public as well." And this is actually, I'm taking this from an article by our old friend Annie Laurie Bird, who includes a section in her book, My Hometown, about the naming of Nampa. I don't want to go too far into this because we don't have a lot of time tonight, but basically the word Nampa is probably Shoshone.
Shoshone.
For jabroni. I smell what you're cooking.
Well, it ain't pretty.
The word's probably Shoshone. Man, I keep saying that. Because the town's pronounced Shoshone, right?
Shoshone, yeah.
And then the tribe is Shoshone.
Shoshone, yeah.
Okay, perfect.
Show band now, right?
Right.
Shoshone Bannock, but...
Yeah. The word Nampa itself is probably Shoshone for either moccasin or foot. The basically the name has been traced back to the first surveyors for the railroad for the Oregon Short Line, and basically they probably found some footprints in the area, used the Shoshone word because they had Shoshone guides while they were laying out the railroad, and then just used the name Nampa. So I want to talk about Fred Mock and his kind of shenanigans, and probably he'll get his own episode here pretty soon. But he was a jokester, he was a prankster, so it fits exactly within his character to do something like this. And here we are, 104 years later, still thinking, or a lot of people think that the name Nampa comes from the Indian chief. So Mark, what do you think about that?
Well, I think what was the term we used to say in graduate school? Put on your lenses, right? From that time and place. It's a rather creative outing. Yes, now we see it as extremely racist, but, I mean, it's an interesting tale. And but I also, I think from you, have heard that this place was called New Jerusalem.
That's right.
Not like Jerusalem's Lot, Salem's Lot, but it definitely seems like you could have like some sort of high desert vampire situation going on here.
Yeah, well, New Jerusalem was basically a mocking name that the citizens of Boise came up with because of the attempt at piety early on in Nampa's history.
That never works out, piety.
Right.
Right. I mean, look at how many people complain about like 3% alcohol beer in fucking Utah, bro.
Right.
It just don't work out, bud.
So the story that the city of Nampa is named after an Indian chief, myth is broken.
Broken. Where's my token?
All right, Mark, what do you got for us?
Well, sir, you want me to go?
I do.
You want me to go next?
Yes, I do.
Okay, well, I guess one thing that I've always heard, and that it's a tad bit controversial. I've gotten into some, I guess I would say, debates about it. Does Boise, the city of Boise, and the valley as a whole, rest on land that is actually not the property of the United States?
This is a good one.
Have you heard this, Jeffrey?
I have, actually. I was researching for the upcoming episode on the snake war, and I found some information on this one. But yeah, tell me all about it, Mark.
Oh, shit. Just pause there. I can't. All right, so basically, Jeff, since I started grad school at Boise State University in 2011, I have continually heard time and time again that the land in which Boise and Boise State and the valley in whole sits on is actually the land of the show band people out in Fort Hall, right? And so lots of people are like, oh yeah, dude, they're gonna come and claim it again, right? They're gonna take it from us. I'm like, I don't think that's what they're looking for. And if you actually, kind of trace the story to its root, you find that that's actually not what the show band people are actually looking for. But to start from the beginning, always the best. The Shoshone and Bannock peoples have lived in the Boise Valley and the larger Snake River Basin for many, many centuries. Their ancestors have been here before them for millennia. But fur trappers and traders would be the first to come into contact with the tribes in the Boise Valley in 1811, right? The Astorians, as founded Astoria, Oregon. That guy we talked about, that wonderful scamp, John Jacob Astor, right? Sent some fur traders out here. They come through here in 1811. And, they're the first people to come to the valley and to describe this, very kind of, I guess fertile valley where the Shoshone people save these guys by feeding them dogs, right? How much is that doggy in the window? Well, it depends where you are. Yeah. By the pound. Anyway, I kid. So, they come through here, they're saved. And so that was kind of your first contact. And you had more fur traders come through here and trappers. And so you had sometimes good relations, sometimes bad relations, depending on the time. And then, the pioneers start streaming into California and Oregon. And so in the 1840s, you get some the pioneers coming in here. And there's a pretty, mutually beneficial relationship going on for both groups. Trading fish, salmon, which used to flow freely, swim freely through the Boise River. And anyway, they're trading salmon for European goods, metal, pots, and all that kind of stuff. So it's pretty good. But over time that changed, and it didn't change for the better, right? And so lands along the Oregon trails, and I say trails because, yes, it was trails. They were damaged by like wagons and animals that would, domesticated stock that would eat up all the kamas roots. Mm-hmm. And the grazing land for the Shoshones and Bannocks, steeds, the ponies, the horses. And so this was a real problem. And so, you started to get tit for tat killings on both sides. Disease starts, and so, okay, well, the white travelers that were coming through were seen as dangerous. So there's killing going on both sides. And then Jeff, the 1860s roll around, and did things get better? No, they got worse. And why, Jeff, me lad? Why do you think it got worse?
Oh, let me guess. Maybe gold was found just north of Boise City in the Boise Basin.
Gold, you say?
I do. So yeah, August 2nd, 1862 on Grimes Creek, which runs right through the Boise Basin, which we'll use that term quite a few times on this show if you're not familiar with the area. That is like Idaho City, Placerville, over all the way to like Horseshoe Bend, right?
Yeah, right there. Above, you can go down Harris Creek Road.
Right.
And there's like an old stage stop and everything down to Horseshoe Bend, yeah.
Did I ever tell you that time I took that road in the wintertime in my Ford Fusion?
That's the right vehicle for that.
It was terrible.
Dude, did anybody...
I'm surprised I didn't die.
Yeah, man. I think I'd rather go with like being in the 1860s and
right.
Snowshoeing up in that motherfucker.
Literally the only other vehicles I saw on that road were logging trucks that day. So,
that's how much we love history, folks.
That's true. Actually, I took my author photo from Brave as a Lion that day.
Oh, really? Oh, yeah. I saw. Yeah. Okay.
Anyway.
So
you want to do this part about the... Is that my part or your part?
No, that's my part.
Okay,
yeah, sorry. Jeff. Yeah, 'twas the yellow iron, as the Indians called it, that turned the white men so mad. So it is that we return to, as we've talked about. Okay, so
we haven't talked about them yet.
Yeah, but I was going in order, so.
Okay.
Okay, so it is that we return. Fucking motherfucker. Okay. Yes, Jeff, it was the yellow iron, as the Indians called it, that turned the white men mad. And so let me come to Caleb Lyon of Lionsdale, our second illustrious territorial governor.
After William Wallace.
William Wallace! Yeah. Not of Bannockburn and Sterling Bridge, but yes, of territorial Idaho, Lewiston.
Right.
But yeah, Caleb Lyon of Lionsdale was not quite an invertebrate, but he wasn't really upright either. He was our territorial governor in 1864, and, in that time period, tensions had been coming to a head in the area around Boise and up in the Boise Basin, as we talked about earlier, around Idaho City. And Jeff, can you give us a little summary of the tensions that were going on up there with the miners and the native peoples?
I sure can, Mark. So you had this brand new mining district that was being set up in the Boise Basin, and to live, you had to have supplies, right, in order to live and mine. And to get supplies into the mines, you had these pack trains that would come in from, I think, Walla Walla and the Dalles in Oregon. So the problem was, and of course, also from the west, they were coming in on the Oregon Trail and then going up through what Boise City is now to get to the mining area.
So they were coming back.
Yeah.
On the Oregon Trail from the west. Yeah.
Basically. And it's kind of confusing when you think about it because Idaho was settled backwards. But yeah, you had these wagon trains and pack trains, more importantly, that were being attacked by what they called at the time the, quote, Snake Indians, which we now refer to as Shoshone, Bannock, and Northern Paiute. The problem with that is the price on these goods skyrocketed because of these attacks. And so a group of miners under the command of a guy named Jeff Standifer they organized at Placerville and then went down Morris Creek, and they fought the Indians at what we call Mayfield now, which is between Boise and Mountain Home, that kind of like flat area.
So they fought out in Mayfield.
They did, and
oh, wow.
My goal is to find that battlefield someday, but we need to talk about that. We fought there, and then a contingent went east along the Snake River to Salmon Falls, fought them again, and then down into the Owyhees. Another contingent went west to the Malheur River in Oregon. They had another battle there. So there was a lot of death and murder between the white man and the Native Americans at the time.
And what's crazy is last night you and I were chatting about this, that we were reading Merle Wells, the professor from Boise State, right?
The Mac Daddy of Idaho history.
Yeah, the one we can rely on, right? And here's the thing is, he said, what is it, right in the Roby Creek area on your way up to Idaho City, up Highway 21? Look down into the reservoir there where Moores Creek runs into the Lucky Peak Reservoir. And this article from 1866 claims that there was a massacre of 16 Shoshone that happened in that area, right?
Which I literally wrote the book on Standifer's Rangers, which they were called, and this kind of time period, and I've never seen that referred to anywhere else. So it's kind of interesting. So I almost wonder if that wouldn't even be the same time period or same year. So
because there was another massacre that happened of like 18 or so tribesmen somewhere.
Yeah. I think the number that Standifer allegedly killed near Mayfield was a lot higher than that. It was like 40-ish. So
when was that? In 1864?
1863. It was just days after the territory was created.
Okay, so
if you get my book, Brave as a Lion, Jeff Standifer and the Knights of the Golden Circle, currently available on Amazon. You can see
it's pure gold, baby.
Read that whole story. Anyway, Mark, please continue.
Yeah, so anyway, as you were saying, things weren't that peaceable-like in the area. And so, like 1863, the Army comes in, they establish Fort Boise. Lincoln had created the territory in March of 1863. Fort Boise is chosen as a spot, July 1st through the 4th, somewhere in there, 1863. Same day Gettysburg is being fought back in Pennsylvania. Yeah. Better to be out here, but so it was established, and I come to you for a few reasons. I knew that to protect the wealth, to protect the miners that are pulling that wealth from the mountains and other areas, protect the Indians from the miners, but also to punish at the same time the violent Shoshone, Paiute, Bannock, and then also to protect U.S. interests from Standifer and any militias that are maybe pro-Confederate or supporters of the Confederate themselves.
Should I have added that Standifer was a agent of the Confederate government?
Yeah. So, yeah, exactly.
Kind of important, right?
Kind of important. There was a valid concern, and we'll briefly talk about something like that later. But, yeah, there was a valid concern of, extra theaters going on or wars going on in this area, or I guess an extra theater of the Civil War opening in sort of this guerrilla war type clandestine situation here out in the West, because it was about extracting those materials that would keep the war effort going and funded, and both sides were looking at this stream of revenue. But anyway, and so our illustrious Caleb Lyons, in a move to protect the Shoshone Bannock, maybe, as well as the white settlers and the miners. He comes, and in 1864, October 10th of 1864, he sits down with a small group of Boise Shoshone and Bannock, and he basically just is like, okay, here's this treaty. Some of these people at the fort, the major and some of the other officers sign it. Mr. Lyons of Lyonsdale, where he's from in New York. He signs it, and that's how he called himself, by the way. And then a long list of different Shoshone names are listed with X's next to it on the treaty, right? And so these people didn't represent the leadership of the Boise Shoshone. They were desperate, hungry people that were kind of caught up in a huge war for them.
Mm-hmm. It's basically like, hey, sign this and we might give you some food.
We might give you a little bit of food, and you know what? We'll protect you. You won't die. You're starving, and you're riddled with disease, and you're cold, and all these things. So guess what? We will, and what are you willing to give up? And basically, in advance, Caleb was thinking, well, okay, we'll get the Boise Valley, and I don't know what that's going to cost, so I'm just going to leave the amount for these lands in the Boise Valley and even beyond blank. And then I'm going to send this back to Congress and then have it ratified by the Senate, and everybody's going to find it hunky-dory. But the only problem is that he gave up per the treaty. Let's read this from, or at least let's sum this up. So he gave up most of the valley, the Shoshone gave up most of the valley, but the exception was land 30 miles on each side of the Boise River from the river's center, and all the country that drained from its mouth, like down by the Snake River, right, to its source up in the mountains, like by Atlanta, in that area. Mm-hmm. And an equal share of fisheries, and this was what was promised. And so I'll just say that the land on which Boise sits was never relinquished because, of course, the United States Senate could not ratify this treaty. There was a fort on there already. Boise City had developed already. It was far too valuable. I'm not saying that what the government did was right by any means, but Caleb Lyon was also somewhat of a dimwit, while also being amazingly, foresighted, right?
He was definitely in it for himself at all times.
Yeah,
I think this treaty, as we call it, was kind of more to appease the Shoshone while he was working on getting enough maybe troops, or maybe getting into a position where they could have what they needed to have this land in other ways.
Yeah, and I think he just kind of was like, there's one thing that Merle Wells again said, and then there's both detractors and his fans, more detractors as he was in office longer, but basically that would say that he would do what was right for Caleb, right? And his life definitely shows this. Always trying to do what's right for the most powerful person at the time, or what could get him, but in some ways he was amazingly, advanced for his time period. It's just he didn't carry through on his promises.
Right.
With the money for the Nez Perce, up around the Lapwai mission, right? He's like, oh, we need to get you a church. We're going to build you this church. Oh, we need to get you all the things, a sawmill and all that was promised. But then they found gold up there, and he tried to finagle that land. And so it's just like, and then his promises were never added up to. And where did those funds go?
Into his own pocket.
That bastard, they sure did. And, so anyway, this is the guy who came up with this treaty, while on paper, foresighted, probably need a few more drafts for sure. You could say he was trying to save lives, and did save lives in some ways. But at the same time, they were totally unrealistic expectations. And the thing that shows the double-sided nature of this man is he also he put money into what do you call it, the scalp fund.
Oh yeah.
Where from $25 to $100, if anybody killed a Shoshone, anybody, a Native American, I don't think it would matter who it was.
So children,
women,
men,
and men.
and each one had a different amount. that they could get, right, for those scalps.
And if you brought in that scalp, you know, depending on what type it was, a man would fetch 100.
Now,
a child like 25.
Did he put 500 of his own money in there?
500 of his own money. Yeah. And the source that Merle Wells quoted or whatever, or used, was correspondence of Caleb Lyon himself.
That pretty much seals the deal on that.
Yeah, and so this was this guy that was like trying to appease Republicans, right? Because he was put in power by Abraham Lincoln. And then, but he was a supporter later, after Laban is, you know, assassinated, of Johnson.
Yeah.
You know, and so it's like he's constantly, so I don't think I don't know.
Again,
you know,
he was out for his own self.
Yeah, exactly. And that's who this guy was. And so, but, you know, all of that aside, you know, the treaty was never ratified. The Shoshone in the area that had signed that treaty, they're put in a camp, you know, basically like, you know, wooden, you know, sage and wood, what are they, wickiups, right?
Yeah.
Conical kind of constructs up in the hills a few miles behind Fort Boise, where it is now, the softball fields and all that shit. Well, up there used to be these camps, and then as the group grew, you got Chauvin, Paiute, and Bannock running away from the war, right?
Yeah, so again, this is during the Snake War, which we're going to actually do at least a 2-part episode on coming up here soon. And as the war progressed, they were rounding up these Native Americans, and they were sending them up to this camp. And I think they were also some like refugee type situations where they were just so starved out and hungry that they would turn themselves in there as well.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and so they moved this camp a few times. And so I think 1865, 66, there was 30 miles north of the Fort Boise or Boise City was this camp, and it had, I'm not sure if this is true, upward of, you know, 1,000 people in it.
Wow.
And, you know, yeah, so even if that's not true and it's only 500, it's still a sizable camp, right?
Right.
And so these poor people were starving. They had consumption. The ones that could work would come into Boise, but there was a curfew, right, if you were a Shoshone or something. And so you could only do these jobs, and then you had to go back out to your camp, and it was a horrible living. And so come 1868, Fort Hall is created. And so, you know, by 1869, I think it was Governor Ballard. Was it Governor Ballard?
Sounds right.
Yeah. And he was like, oh, you know, we got to get these people to the Fort Hall. And that's what happened, and they're marched out there.
And I think what the start of that is because gold had been found lower down into the Boise foothills, so they needed that area.
Yeah. And we've been to some of those places, right?
Yeah.
That'll eventually be found.
Like the Adelman and stuff like that,
just,
Black Hornet.
Just right up there in the hills, you know, all this history that sometimes you stumble upon in the canyons.
Or you force your interns to march up there.
Oh, she had fun. The best intern ever. But yeah, so anyway, you know, and then I heard that, you know, there was a man who wrote some letters, essentially, and he was a Shoshone man, and he was born on Eagle Island outside of, you know, Eagle on the Boise River. And he said that, you know, in 1868, all the Shoshone from Weiser to Boise City were rounded up, and there was some odd 500. You know, and again, I this is another person's version of this story from the time and place, but the numbers might be fudged. But either way, a sizable number of Shoshone were gathered up in Bannock, and they were forcefully, or at that point, they had to go, right? They were going to die. And so of these 500, 350 made it.
Wow.
You know.
And this is what they refer to as Idaho's Trail of Tears.
Yeah, and so, you know, whether from disease or, you know, people refused to go and they were shot. I'm no expert on this, but I do know a sizable number of people died on the way to Fort Hall.
Okay.
You know, and so I guess just to get to the end of this, 1946, you know, the Shoshone are Fort Hall, they're there. You know, the Boise claim, as it comes to be known, to the Boise lands is forgotten. But then in the 1940s, Congress comes up with this program to look into, the tribes that have been uncompensated for their lands via these treaties, the many treaties, trail broken treaties that the government has instituted, and they're trying to compensate these tribes. And so some lawyers for the Boise Shoshone misfile the claim under the wrong tribe's name. And this was I don't know when, but come 1976, the problem's found out because the Boise Shoshone are like, hey, man.
For almost 34 years, they're sitting there.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know when their claim was gotten to or filed, but I do know that come 76, it's like, oh, wait, we filed your claim for the land that you were promised under the wrong tribe's name.
Yeah.
And you got to love bureaucracy, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so the due date was in 1974. You had to file by that year. If not, it was no good. So 1976, it's like, oh, sorry, here's this little red pencil error. We can't see your whole claim for all these years, 150 years. And so, that's where things lie. And so technically, the Senate never ratified the treaty, right?
Yep.
Or the Bruneau one that came after.
I don't even know if
1866.
If it was debated in the Senate.
No, it was just like, fuck this. This doesn't make any sense.
Yeah.
And so it was never ratified, and therefore there was no transfer of the land for any sort of monetary or even just food. There was never a transfer of ownership. And so, yeah, technically, it still belongs to the Shoshone-Bannock people. But the thing is, I always hear people that are like, they tend to be like, hey, man, you don't tell me to feel guilty about this. I'm like, nobody's trying to tell you to feel guilty. Yeah. The thing is that the Shoshone don't want the land. They want access to it. They want compensation for it. And I know the city of Boise, when I was there, it's like the return of the, Boise Valley people. Yeah. And, it's a very important area for them where Table Rock is and the whole valley. And so, right, there needs to be some sort of compensation and access to this land and their rights that has not been addressed for 150 years. But they don't want to move you from your house and be like, well, you got to go over there now because we're here. That's not what they're looking at.
Right.
So something to be talked about in the future because I think they deserve some sort of compensation.
All right, Mark. So the myth that the Boise Shoshone still own the land that Boise City sits on is...
True.
All right.
Yep.
Cool. All right. Why don't we take a quick commercial break, and we will be right back with some more Idaho myths. All right, and we're back from that commercial break. Hopefully you like our sponsors and choose to give them some of your money.
If you don't, put a curse on your family.
He's done that several times.
It never works, though, because, I got none of the magic, baby.
Right. All right. Speaking of curse, our friends might curse when we... Hold on. I can do this. Our friends in northern Idaho might curse when they hear this next one that Lewiston should still be the capital of Idaho.
What about Clarkston?
That's
Washington. Always fucking Lewiston, Jeff. But what about Clarkston?
I mean, Lewiston has that beautiful paper plant that smells great all the time.
You know what? I like my paper plant smelling like horse ass.
Smells like money.
I know. When I smell a horse's ass, I smell money because I think of the paper mill.
So I see this one actually argued quite a bit on social media. And, Mark, we're on Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, TikTok for some reason. So check us out there.
Grindr, Tinder.
Yes, all those. Pinterest.
FarmersOnly.com.
So I think, Mark, we're going to probably cover this story at length later on someday. But for now, we're going to suffice it to say that Lewiston was the first territorial capital of Idaho. Much to the chagrin of our northern neighbors, the state seal and archives were ordered moved by Governor Caleb Lyon of Lionsdale. And I will never not say his name that way.
Dude, as a child of the 80s, whenever I hear that guy's name, Lionsdale, from where he's from in New York, but it makes me think of Lionel and the Thundercats.
Nice.
Does that make you think of that?
Thundercats are good.
They were pretty legit, but
They were. I was more of a He-Man fan, but...
Oh, He-Man was sweet, but what was the little cat weird creature in Thundercats?
Oh.
Like, snark, snoutful, snoutful, that guy.
The weird comedic... Yeah.
Yeah, anyway, that weird shit makes me think Caleb Lionsdale and then vice versa.
All right. Anyway, Governor... he ordered basically the state seal and the archives, basically everything you need for a capital to be a capital, moved from Lewiston down to Boise. Now, we'll be the first to admit that there was some sneaky kind of underhanded politics at play here. But, there's good reason why it was moved. And,
no, sir, you don't say. Sneaky politics.
Well, not at all.
No, good thing that's all in the past, Jeffrey.
Right. You want to find those documents in your garage or something, that'd be bad.
No, you don't. Especially, well, let's just be honest. It's happened on both sides of the divide there, hasn't it? But anyway.
Recently.
Back to the past.
Yes, to the past.
We can find comfort.
Like I said, though, there was good reason why the capital was moved from Lewiston to Boise. Think about what was going on in the state at the time. From the time that the first gold rush in Idaho on the Clearwater River, still can't talk. From the first gold rush on the Clearwater River, Lewiston became a supply point for all the mines in Idaho, and then gold was discovered on Baboon Creek.
Oh, the classiest of all primates, Jeffrey.
Yes,
the
it
baboon.
was. And
not to be confused with the bonobo.
Ooh, it's a sexy monkey right there.
It's like a smart, kind chimp.
Okay.
Small, compact.
Not sure where we're going with that.
I don't know either, Jeff. Have you cleared your water?
I have.
Okay.
I cleared my water.
Sorry. Okay. Anyway, go ahead. You were talking of Florence, I believe.
Yeah, so Baboon Creek, we're talking about Florence, the Salmon River mines, and that was in 1862 where gold was found there, and then the Boise Basin in 1863 and the Owyhee mines in the next year, if you listen to the official account. The Idaho Territory was established in March of 1863, and Lewiston was named as the capital. But by that time, the population was already shifting to the southern part of the state, and there were a bunch of pesky mountains that made communication between the capital and the population center slow and ineffective.
Forsooth, Jeff. What of the carrier pigeon?
We have way too many birds of prey for that.
Perhaps you could outfit the birds carrying national mail with armor.
I don't think so, Mark. Anyway,
are you saying it would weigh the pigeon down?
Yes. So Boise also had this shiny new army fort and a contingent of soldiers to protect those mines. While Lewiston had to rely on Fort Walla Walla, which was in the Washington Territory, for protection. So, just didn't make sense for Lewiston to be the capital of Idaho anymore.
Man, just like I used to say, man, to people, man, I tell you what, Jimmy Buffett, all that, man, Pina Coladaburg ain't never going to be no Margaritaville, buddy.
I do know.
Okay.
Just kidding, I have no idea. So the story that Lewiston is should still be the rightful capital of Idaho. I'm gonna go ahead and say myth broken on that one, and I don't think we convinced our northern neighbors of that one. But there we are. What else you got, Mark?
Put down your pina coladas, northerners, and have yourself a margarita, buddy.
Yes.
Broken.
What do you got?
Well, I think next I'd like to talk about beaver.
Ooh.
And sickness. Some call it the beaver fever. Some call it the beaver sickness. But there's a little myth that the name of the Malad River, Malady, right? Malady River, in was it Hagerman?
Yeah.
The Hagerman horses?
Yeah.
Nay. Oh, yeah. Okay. Or Gooding County over there.
Yeah, that
Gooding,
area.
right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that 2.5 mile long river, one of the smallest or least long rivers in the
United States.
world, really, is in Idaho, and it was named after sickness. And so let's start with this, Jeff.
Mark, did you know there's a river on the Oregon coast that's like couple hundred yards long?
What's it called?
I can't remember. But this podcast isn't about Oregon, so I don't have to.
Yeah, but you know what? Oregon does relate to us in many ways.
True.
Yeah. Duck fans.
Our weird neighbors.
We like the beavers around here, I think, for the most part. Who hates a beaver?
Mark, why don't you tell us more about beaver?
Well, did you know eating beaver could make you sick, Jeff?
Are you talking about like cold sores?
Well, we've all been there, pal. Watch where you... never mind. Anyway, well, no. I'm talking about something else, Jeff.
No.
Okay? Get your mind out of the
Beaver?
out of the beaver dam. So let me tell you, buddy. Fur traders, trappers named the Malade River, they claim. Of course, it's very French. The Rivière aux Malades, or the Sickly River, after becoming ill from eating beaver trapped on its banks. And they say that the illness was attributed to the poisonous roots that the large mammal... Large small
rodent.
mammal, large rodent,
Right.
would feast upon. Joke, though.
Where I'm at.
You're,
Oh, gotcha. Yeah. Man, you're sure getting to the root of this issue, Mark.
Oh, God. That's a bad one, Jeff.
Yes, it is.
You know what? I appreciate you.
Certified dad joke.
That's... God, it's just like so bad it's bad. But I think you were trying to aim for kind of my sense of humor, so
Yeah.
I appreciate that, and I
Never
appreciate
gonna get
you.
there.
So... Many fur trapping expeditions were led between 1811, the Astorians, they came from the east to the west, and 1843. So when the Oregon Trail migration began, that was the time period where it kind of ended. But Donald Mackenzie was a fur trapper for the Northwest Company. I do believe that was a British venture, Jeff.
Of course.
But he was an experienced beaver trapper, and his men and him experienced sickness from said beaver, they say. So after eating the furry, hairy little beavers, they got convulsions, fevers, headaches, and, they also shit themselves uncontrollably. So that will ruin one's day. And so I don't know how they basically came up with this, but they thought that the cure was gunpowder, lard or grease, and black pepper.
I do like a lard.
I do. I am fond of black pepper, but mixed with gunpowder and lard, I'm not so sure how that would taste, but they would suck this stuff down. Ooh. Put that on your tortilla chip, fellas. Basically, they thought that, maybe through puking, I'm not sure if that what happened, but or the placebo effect, it kind of worked. So they claim in their journals. And, a few guys died, but anyway, after convulsing and shitting uncontrollably, like happens to me every time I enter a church, boom. But basically, yeah, they said most people survived this. And in fact, in another fur trapper trader's book, memoir, Alexander Ross, in Fur Hunters of the Far West, he describes coming to the realization that while he was in the, basically the Payette River region, it's my place, man, shit. It's fucking computer. Like I press down and it jumps all the way to the top of the... Okay, so I'll just start over at... In fur trader Alexander Ross's book, Fur Hunters of the Far West, Ross describes coming to the realization that it struck me that there must have been something poisonous in our food or water. I began to inquire more particularly what each person had eaten that morning and found that all those who had breakfasted on the fresh beaver taken out of the river were affected. The culprit, hemlock water parsnip root. So, Jeff, can you imagine? It's uncomfortable, it's dangerous, you're in a new environment that you've never been to before. There are angry Shoshone and Bannock, maybe some Paiute roaming around, looking to kill you, or perhaps trade with you. It depends on the time. Right. You had eaten some bad beaver meat, and you were shitting yourself uncontrollably and convulsing. How would that be for a good time? But
yeah,
wouldn't that be fun? Now that's extreme hunting right
Takes
there.
me back to the Oregon Trail and dying in dysentery.
Oh, I know, right? Mm-hmm. Except that's even better, I think, than dying as a fur trapper of beaver sickness, because if you were to die of this, or, be crapping yourself and convulsing, you also had to continue trapping, and walking and humping along with these iron traps. And these guys would get in these creeks and rivers, and it's freezing, and you'd have to, unhinge these traps and bait the trap and continue to go. And if you couldn't, guys would have to drag you along on some sort of, what do they call those things that the...
Travoy.
Yeah, travoy. It's not just a fashionable coffee bar and eagle.
I should have just taken a sick day. That's what I would have done.
I know, been like, hey, listen, I'm going to hang out here on the travoy.
Yeah.
But yeah, that would be pretty horrible. And so what they came to find is that if they killed the beaver and they opened up the beaver, and there was white, spongy meat inside, well, that was not the good stuff. That was the beaver that would get you the beaver fever, baby.
Watch out for that meat in your beaver.
That's right. Watch out for the white beaver. It'll get you. And so, anyway, this happened in the Payette River and stuff too, but, always know the route that your beaver's been chewing on. So basically, the Malad River means sickly river because of beaver sickness. This is true.
True story.
True blue flu.
All right. So from the beaver, we're going to, Mark, I want to talk about gems, and supposedly the gem of the mountains, which allegedly is what the word Idaho means, from a Shoshone word.
I thought it meant goat's paw.
Ooh, goat's paw.
Oh, shit. Hoof.
Hoof.
Hoof. God damn it, Mark. Hoof.
So, yeah, basically I've heard quite a bit this story that says that the word Idaho comes from the Shoshone language and means either gem of the mountains or the sun comes down the mountains, something like that. Story goes that when the first white men entered what is now Idaho, they lived peacefully for some time among the Shoshone.
Well, that was largely true during the 1840s and, the old Oregon Trail days, the early ones.
Yeah, before there was a glut of immigration, right?
Yes, sir. The glut.
So every morning they would be awakened to shouts of Idaho, and there's different spellings on that.
Hey, Idaho, man.
Yeah, Idaho, something like that. And so when they asked their native hosts about what this meant, the white dudes were told that it referred to the sun coming down the mountain. So it's basically a way of saying, the sun's up, get your lazy asses out of bed, we got stuff to do.
I'm going to start yelling Idaho to my wife in the morning.
I think she would like that.
I do everything around the house,
Sorry, Michaela.
Oh, Michaela, baby.
So the phrase Idaho or Idaho was somehow changed to Idaho, and it made it into the name of our state. Just kidding. There's a lot more to the story, and we have to go to Colorado for the next part. So back in the year 1860, 3 years before Idaho Territory even became a thing, Congress was looking around for a good name for the new territory around Pikes Peak mines. Now, back in the Pikes Peak district, there was an election which sent a man named George Willing to Washington, D.C. as the delegate to create the territory. But while he was en route, his opponent, a man named B.D. Williams, was successful.
B.D.I. Williams, that son of a bitch.
That guy. Williams got the election overturned, and he was sent to Washington as well, where he was seated as the delegate. Now, it was Williams who suggested the name Jefferson, which marked a lot of the territory out west. This was kind of a name that was proposed a lot of times. We have Washington, and then, some people wanted Jefferson for some reason.
I get tired. You know what? I get tired of Jefferson.
You ever watch The Jeffersons?
Yeah, you know what? But Jefferson, Lincoln, there's so much, in this state, so much damn talk about Lincoln. But anyway, I digress. The point is, go on.
But when the Republican-controlled House of Representatives rejected it, they wanted a Indian word, quote, Indian word instead. The name Idaho was presented as an alternative by Mr. Williams. Now, needless to say, there was a lot of political wrangling back and forth, especially considering we were talking about the lead up to the Civil War and the balance of power in this country was at stake. So on December 18th, 1860, the House of Representatives has a bill printed up with the name Idaho. But then a few weeks later, that bill goes to the Senate for consideration, where Senator James S. Green says, Idaho is a very good name. In the Indian language, it signifies Gem of the Mountains. So, some senator said it, so case closed. That's what it means, right?
Not goat's pie.
Goat's pie.
Not goat's pie.
I don't know what you're on about. But no, Senator Lane, Joseph Lane, he was a Democrat from Oregon. He spoke up and said, I do not believe it is an Indian word. It is a corruption. No Indian tribe in this nation has that word, in my opinion. He went on to say, it is a corruption, certainly, a counterfeit, and ought not to be adopted. And, Senator Lane really knew who he was talking about. He had been living and killing natives for a couple decades at this point.
Best way to get to know somebody, really, is to, learn how to kill them, Jeff.
Right you are, Mark. Anyway, Senator Lane, he's also the first territorial governor of Oregon. He led the volunteers during the Rogue River Wars. He was the one that helped track down and arrest the perpetrators of the Whitman Massacre among the Cayuse tribe. And I will tell you more about some of his shenanigans in a few weeks in our Confederate Invasion of Boise episode. Long story short, the Senate voted to name this new territory Idaho.
I heard the Whitmans were kind of dicks, though.
Narcissa, actually, she was a badass. If you read her trail diaries from the immigration part of it, because she was literally, her and her husband, what was her husband's name?
Dickface.
Whitman. Mr. Whitman.
I'm just saying Narcissa sounds like an evil character in Harry Potter.
And she was. Certainly to the Cayuse she was.
Yeah, okay. That's what I read, but yes, I see what you're saying.
No, she gave a lot of women back east because she wrote letters, and all those letters were published in those eastern newspapers. She gave women back east the hope and the kind of drive to be something more than what they were doing back east, and all these adventures she was having out west. And the most interesting thing is she got pregnant on the trail. And back when I
Harlot.
What
are we talking about?
By her husband, sir.
Oh,
yes.
Okay.
So she got pregnant somewhere in Wyoming. So she did one of the most treacherous parts of the Oregon Trail, which was the Snake River, while she was 3-4 months pregnant.
I didn't know that. That's interesting because I think that's a perfect kind of example of Like I just said, she was a bit of a turd. But here's the thing: she was to the Cayuse, and she was every bit a turd to the Cayuse.
She was, yeah.
But based upon the time period, I guess her attitude would have been somewhat commonplace. Although, like the Spaldings at Lapwai were better than that, but yet they still looked at it more of a parental role on the Nez Perce. But here's the thing: like to other people, she's a heroine.
Yeah.
You know, she's a very heroic figure in different ways. And so it's like, that's the thing about history, right? People want it to be one thing or the other, including me. Mm-hmm. But it's everything, because just like today, we're complicated people.
Yeah.
Well, that's what they were then.
People like to make history black and white, and it's various shades of gray.
Shimone. Black or white. Shimone.
Okay.
Okay, I'll stop. Sorry, Jeff, I'm making you red in the face.
What else I can say about Narcissa? Anyway, so my other point about Narcissa was that she and her husband, which I can't remember, what the hell is his name?
Nathan.
No,
I'm
that's
not
not
sure.
it. Anyway, the Whitmans, they were the trailblazers of the Oregon Trail. The Oregon Trail didn't exist until they went west. That's what I was trying to say.
Yeah, right. And they came through down the Boise River with the Spaldings. They went to Fort Boise, the one that was established in 1834.
Old Fort Boise.
By Wyeth, right?
Yeah.
So Parma, right? They came right through where we are right now in Boise.
Yep. Anywho,
yeah, that's neither here nor there, but it is interesting.
Here nor there. Where was I? Okay. So yeah, I'm going to tell you more about Governor Lane's or Senator Lane's shenanigans here in a few weeks in our Confederate invasion of Boise episode. Long story short, though, the Senate voted to name the territory Idaho. Senator Lane's comments got back to Mr. Williams, and he started thinking. After doing some investigation, he discovered that he had been the butt of a practical joke at the hands of his political opponent, George Willing.
George was always willing to joke practically.
Right, he was.
Oh, gosh.
The name Idaho, he found out, did not mean gem in the mountains, and it certainly was not an Indian word.
Wasn't goat's paw.
No, not at all. So after Williams found this out, he took the issue back to the Senate, and they changed the name back to Colorado. Now, fast forward about a year and a half, when considerations to split off the eastern part of Washington Territory were being raised in Congress, the name Idaho was still out there, was still available, and people liked it. Thank you, Marcus Whitman. Thank you, Mark.
You're welcome.
Yes. Anyway.
Cause.
And, okay, so it didn't seem widely known at the time to be a fake name, so it was, still out there to be used. And so after the name Montana was briefly considered, Idaho won out, and here we sit in Idaho today, allegedly.
Just like San Diego means whale vagina.
Yes.
Right.
I have no idea.
Will Ferrell, Anchorman.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. Cut that out, Jeff.
Okay. Now, there are also some stories about a steamboat bearing miners to the Clearwater Mines being named Idaho, and that's where the state name comes from. The poet Joaquin Miller was also given credit for naming Idaho. It's possible that some of those kind of were happening at the time, but it's pretty clear that the name Idaho was kind of a buzzword at the time and a name that people liked, people wanted to use. So that's how Idaho got its name. But Mark, back to George Willing, the evidence does point to him or one of his friends as being the originator of the word. In 1875, a friend of Willing's wrote a letter to the New York Tribune stating that Willing was often heard telling the story of how he came up with the idea. Apparently, he was calling to the daughter of one of his friends. The girl was named Ida, so he called to her, "Ida, ho, come see me."
Wait. He called her a hoe? Not cool.
Not cool. I think it was more of saying like, "Hey, hey, come see me."
Okay, wait. It's Ida, comma, ho, because if it was Ida, period, Ho!
Right.
Come see me. Right? It's different. I see. Okay.
So, Idaho. Anyway,
Idaho, Idaho, hey, Idaho.
One more side note about Willing. He died the year before this letter was written down in Arizona, and he was the father of a scheme called the Peralta Land Grant. Mark, you ever heard of the Peralta Land Grant?
No, sir.
Long story short, again, when Willing died, a friend of his found his trunk, and his trunk was full of these documents. The friend was named James Addison Revis, and Revis took these documents, and they were basically a way for Revis to claim a large chunk of the state of Arizona, or territory at the time. And it basically said that Revis was the descendant of a Spanish land baron, so go all the way back to the time when the Spanish had claim to Arizona, and basically said he was the son or descendant of this land baron, and he had the rightful claim to this huge, and I can't remember how many hundreds of thousands of acres of land it was. Now the whole scheme kind of fell apart when those documents went to the land office, but it almost worked. They almost got this huge chunk of Arizona. Now,
by using forged documents?
Yeah, it's a crazy story.
Like the Republican Party.
Yes.
Oh, Jeff. Kidding. Neither here nor there. Really.
It wasn't as good as that time, sadly.
I know, you just get rid of it.
Damn it.
Damn it. That's okay.
Anyway, so that whole story ties in with the Knights of the Golden Circle, because James Revis and his cousin were supposedly members of the KGC.
Man, those guys get everywhere, dude.
They do, and you can tie them into a lot of things. It's crazy. Anyway, if you want to know more about the Knights of the Golden Circle, check out my book, Brave as a Lion. Just standing for the Knights of the Golden Circle on Amazon.
Man, it's pure gold, baby. It is a lion of a book.
Thank you, Mark. And can't forget this part. There's a sub myth on this one, and I've read online quite a bit, Mark, that a lot of the older folk were taught that the name Idaho was a Shoshone word for Idaho or Jim in the Mountains or whatever. So I kind of wanted to look into this, and I actually found this here book on my bookshelf. Kind of crazy that it was there, right?
Idaho in the Pacific Northwest.
Yeah, so this was actually a textbook that was used in schools back in the day. And
it must be true then.
Exactly. If anyone has this at home, please turn to page 54, and this will be on the test, so pay attention. On page 54, column 2, it says Idaho is a Shoshone word. I'm sorry. Idaho is a... It says Idaho is a Shoshone Indian exclamation. The word consists of 3 parts. The first is E, which in English conveys the idea of coming down. The second is Da. In the Shoshone, stem or root for both sun and mountain. The third syllable, how, denotes the exclamation, stands for just the same thing in Indian at the exclamation mark does in English. And then it goes on to talk about how it means, behold, the sun is coming down the mountains. So I wanted to vindicate some of our older friends that they actually were taught this in school. So take that as you will.
Well, like I tell most kids that I come across, which are not that many, but my children and my niece and nephew and all that, believe everything they tell you in school. Yes. Every freaking thing.
So the idea that Idaho is a word from the Shoshone language, that myth is broken.
Broken.
All right, Mike, why don't we take another quick commercial break, and we'll be right back.
Sounds good.
I think we need another one, right?
Another what?
Another commercial?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, Melissa wanted theirs in the middle if possible.
Okay.
It doesn't matter. Fuck it. It's cool.
We have 2, so which one?
For
2 commercial breaks. Okay.
If they start paying way more, then I'll worry more.
Exactly.
But for now, we have some legit people.
We do.
And then also, I haven't heard from Tammy since I sent her.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if mine was too... I sent the one that we used for everybody else, and I knew they were all liberal.
I think it's fine.
I pandered.
That's all right. All right, welcome back. Hope you enjoyed that word from our sponsors. I know I sure did.
Oh, I did too, Jeff.
Excellent. Mark, what do you got for another myth?
I would like to address the idea that the name of the Owyhees, or the Owyhee Mountains, stems from Hawaiians. Have you heard that before, Jeff?
I have heard this.
Well, how about that beaver? Don't you just love a nice hairy beaver, Jeff?
I d-
Damn it.
Damn it. Got me on that one.
Well, I mean, you know what? The hairier the beaver, the more value the pelt. You know?
It's true.
Well, so anyway,
I like a nice soft beaver.
you don't like an abrasive beaver?
No, not at all.
Yeah.
And when they bite you, that's no.
Yeah.
Can't
Nobody likes a beaver with teeth.
No.
Okay, well, you're probably going to have to cut some of that. But
I
anyway.
cut a lot of this, yes.
So basically, did the fur trappers and traders that ranged all over the lands now encompassing this state Oh, okay, I see. I shouldn't have put a period. So,
Yeah.
Basically, but Jeff, did the fur traders and trappers that range all of these mountains, like many people these days, have the beaver fever? What in the hell did I write here?
I don't know what you're doing.
I'm gonna cut all that shit out.
Okay.
Okay, so all right. Okay. So basically, but in this area, the Boise Valley, right, and along the Boise River, and then even the tributaries, and then so basically, if you find beaver, you start moving down the tributaries, and you're following the fur. And so, I mean, like guys do from bar to bar nowadays. But anyway, so the fur trappers, Donald McKenzie, Alexander Ross, Francois Payette, right, the Payette River, they were, and others were trapping all throughout this area. And so, yeah, like all these dirty dudes were in search of beaver, right? They're dirty, they're out in the woods,
Yep.
They're searching for beaver. But, they also trapped along the Payette, which, was named, as I said, after Francois Payette, who was a manager of the first, not the first Fort Boise, actually it was more like the third Fort Boise, near Parma. It was a Hudson Bay Company fur fort. But then the historians came through in 1811. You got John Jacob Astor. His fur trading venture, it ultimately failed.
Great guy.
Great guy. Really stand-up piece of shit. But, yeah, I digress. Some of those guys that were with John Jacob Astor's fur trading outfit, they eventually came back to the Boise Valley area, like a guy named John Reed. And John established pretty much the first Fort Boise in 1814, somewhere near where Caldwell is now. And it was basically just a small little fort. And it was near the Boise River. They're trapping in the area. And, he was ruthlessly, slaughtered by a group called the Dog Rib Band of the Bannock. But there was a lot of back and forth going on, so who's to blame, really? I don't know. It could go either way. But, so the Boise River for a while was called Reed's River for a wee bit of time. But the thing is it was a dangerous area, is my point. Did you know that, Jeff?
I did not. How many names did it have?
Well, so it was like Little Woody.
Yeah.
That's what I call Woody Harrelson.
Right.
Actually, he's big. He's big Woody. I like
dude,
Woody.
Yeah.
Woody's a badass. But, so, anyway, yeah, it was a dangerous area to live, to trap, all those things. So, Another guy who was on the Astorian party is one of the captains. He leaves the Astorian venture, and he eventually comes back to this area. He knows this area, and he is named Donald Mackenzie. And so, yeah, in October of 1818, he's leading the expedition of the Northwest Company. And anyway, he was speaking of the dangers in his journals, so I would like to read a quote, sir. Basically, he said, excuse me, let me open my tome. I am now about to commence a very doubtful and dangerous undertaking, and shall, I fear, have to adapt the habits of the owl, roam in the night and skulk in the day to avoid our enemies. But if my life is spared, I will be at the river Scamnoch, the Boise, with my people, and return by the 5th of June. Now, I don't know what the 5th of June means, but what I do know is that he's saying this was a really dangerous area. But among his group of people, there were Iroquois from the east. They had trapping experience in a totally different environment, but they came out this way. Some of them even left the group and other groups and became members of tribes in the area. Oh. They were like, hey, we've been fucked over by the white man too. Here we go. Although the area, at that point hadn't been so fucked over. But maybe they could have given a warning. Right. I don't know. Right?
Well, one of the things I want to cover on the show is white renegades among the native tribes. So makes sense.
Yeah, right. Truth is relative. The facts are murky. It's history, folks. Yep. But so another point is, so it was dangerous out there, and there were some Hawaiians with them too. Hawaiians. And as Cook called them after 1778, Captain James T. Kirk. James Cook. Yeah. James Tiberius Cook. Basically, 1778. He discovers, and kind of quote, but Hawaii, and the
Hawaiians already knew it was there.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. And he calls them the Sandwich Islanders, right? It's a sandwich. I'm like ham sandwich, turkey sandwich, club. What do we got going on here? So you know what? White people are introduced to Hawaii, and the Hawaiians, Sandwich Islanders, are introduced to white people, and so anyway. Come 1811, you got the Astorians have founded, Astoria or whatever it was, Fort Astor, the Columbia River, entrance to the Columbia River, the mouth of it, I guess is another word for it. But they eventually, the Hawaiians start coming on these fur ventures, right? And so you get quite a few of them coming on these things. And so anyway, we know that there were Hawaiians in the area. Did you know that, Jeff?
I sure did, Mark.
Well, fuck you then, man. I wanted to introduce you to them, but whatever. Anyway, on Mackenzie's venture, he sends several Hawaiian trappers down another, the Payette River and in some areas, and then they eventually end up going into what was the Owyhees, right? Mm-hmm. And they end up disappearing, not to be found again. And so people on this venture call them the Owyhee. You know what? They didn't know the Owyhee mountains based upon the Hawaiians. But you fast forward, they eventually found one of the skeletons on the Payette River. And there were many more Hawaiians in this area. So if it was them, I don't know exactly. But a little later on, the American missionaries came to the Sandwich Islands, and they start looking into the native language, in order to print out the Bible for their missionary work, right?
Of course.
Of course. It is the Bible. It is always adapted to fit the language of said natives. But anyway, in translating this, they found Owyhee turned out to be Hawaii. And so there is the root of the word. But in Idaho, the older form survived. So instead of saying the Hawaiian Mountains or Hawaii Mountains, the fur traders said, the Idaho place names where they were lost was the Owyhee. And so that stuck in the mountain range in that area, and it was retained. So anyway, that area remained active in the fur trade for quite some time, into the decline of the fur trading area as late as the 1850s.
So can we go find some beaver down the Owyhees these days?
Hawaiian beaver.
Okay.
Owyhee beaver. But anyway, I'm reading through my notes here, buddy, but I don't see anything too important there. But
okay.
So let's see here. The Hawaiian fur trappers, the Owyhee's named after them. It's not myth, it's truth.
All right. Who knew?
Me, actually, because I... Oh, yeah.
Okay. Okay. All right, Mark. I have two more, but I'm going to do actually one because I know you want to get to your big one.
Yes.
And so I'm going to give you the option. Do you want to do Elias Pierce or do you want to do the Siege of Fort Boise? What do you think?
Oh, man, that's a hard one.
Mm-hmm.
We could talk about the Siege of Fort Boise at a later date.
That's what I was thinking.
So I say we go to Elias Pierce, another geographic region of this great state.
All right, Mark, let's go back up to northern Idaho for my last one. And this myth is that Elias Pierce was the first white man to find gold in Idaho.
Well, pierced my heart.
All right. You ready for this one?
Yes.
This one, actually, I found out researching this. I thought Elias Pierce was the guy, but turns out he wasn't. Ready for this?
Yes.
All right. So we all know how important the gold rushes were to the permanent settlement of Idaho. Before gold was found, Idaho was really just a place where people passed through to get to Oregon or California. Now, if you were to Google the first gold find in Idaho, many results come up saying that a guy named Captain Elias D. Pierce was the first man who found gold in Idaho in the year 1860.
So are you saying Elias was more like Elias D's nuts?
He's more like a liar.
Oh, okay.
But here is the real story, Mark. So placer gold or placer gold, I need to be saying. It's placer gold, right?
That's how I say it.
Yeah.
Placer.
Placer. I'm unrefined. I say Boise. Boise.
Boise.
Boise.
Hey, Boise.
Yeah. Anyway, so placer gold was found along the Pend Oreille River in 1852 by some of these trapper dudes that you've been talking about.
Ponderay. That's Ponderay. You know how I know? You know how I know?
How do you know?
Because my wife's family, us too, I guess, have a cabin on the Ponderay Lake.
Okay.
Ponderay, same spelling. Ponderay.
Okay. Maybe you should check your privilege next time.
You know what? Again, it's de France. And here's the thing. It's not on the actual lake. It's up in the mountains above the lake.
So I'm just going to start that one over. All right. So placer gold was found on the Pend Oreille River in 1852 by some of these dudes looking for beaver who we've been talking a lot about. But, obviously they were trappers, so they had traps. They didn't have the equipment to go mine gold. Right, Mark?
Right. I mean, you go out to trap some beaver and you end up finding something else even more precious.
That's right. All right, you have something to say there.
Oh, yeah, man. Shit. I didn't even see that. Yeah, man. Bruh. Just kidding. So, actually, Jeff, I read in A Chinaman's Chance, it's a great book, about, Chinese in the Boise Basin, the Boise area, the Rocky Mountains, but there are reports that a small group of Chinese miners actually found gold dust along the creeks in the Boise Basin, including what was Grimes Creek and would later be, George Grimes would find gold along that creek, like the dead man lotto winner, right? He wins the lotto, finds gold. shot later.
Yep.
Like right
Just
away.
happens to die in the creek that has his name.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly. Jeez, isn't that weird?
Yeah.
But you know what? These Chinese miners, they're like, oh shit, we're gonna get killed. This is dangerous. So they hightail it back to Walla Walla, and they never.
So what you're saying is these Chinamen were a lot smarter than George Grimes.
Yeah.
They knew when to
George
get the
Grimes
heck
like,
out
I am a
of
white man. I don't know if that, but Moses Splon, they were packing some heat, part of a crew, but not a big enough crew. These Chinese miners were a very small crew, and they hightailed it out of there.
Yeah. The Chinese didn't carry arms as much as white men did back in the day.
What about legs?
Right.
So anyway, yeah, man, I see your point. But
Okay.
anyway, okay.
Yeah, so there's a lot to Idaho history even before there was an Idaho territory. Thank you. But fast forward about 6 or 7 years from 1852, Elias Pierce begins to hear rumors about gold on the Nez Perce Reservation. Interesting, his name is Pierce and the Nez Perce. Right?
The Nimepu. I can't say that correctly.
Yeah, no, there's
but
proper word
Perce,
for that.
But theirs is like Perce.
Yeah.
And his is Pierce.
But supposedly it comes from them piercing themselves. But I don't think that's accurate, right?
Prince Albert's?
Okay. Wow.
Pierce my Albert.
We're talking about dick piercings now.
That's like I said on another episode, I think, but that hasn't aired yet. We like to keep things academic around here.
Yes, of course.
Mm-hmm.
So after hearing about this supposed gold on the reservation, he gathered up 11 prospectors and he made plans to sneak onto the reservation. After almost being killed by several Nez Perce sentries, they found a friendly chief named Timothy, whose daughter decided to guide them. Anyway, long story short, they decided to camp one evening. After they set up camp, one of the prospectors in the group, a guy named W.F. Bassett...
Ooh, wait, Jeff. I heard he was a bit of a hound dog, this guy.
LOL.
Okay. Yeah, that's a bad joke right there.
Terrible. Mark, don't do that again. But Bassett took a shovel full of dirt from the But Bassett took a shovel full of dirt from the meadow that they were camped in and put it in his pan. He took it down to the creek and rinsed it out, and he found some of that shiny yellow stuff.
Piss and snow?
No. It was gold, and it was worth a whole 3 cents a pan.
Damn.
Which is dismally low, but it obviously was enough for the party to keep looking the next day. Now, Pierce, in his memoir, didn't mention that it was actually Bassett who found the first gold, and so Pierce often gets the credit himself. He also didn't mention that the name of their Nez Perce guide was Jane Silcott. So I guess, Mark, you and I will have to do a whole episode on her soon.
Oh, yes, we will. We'll have to sniff it out, man.
Definitely a good story.
Yeah. So, myth?
That Elias Pierce was the first white dude to find gold in Idaho?
See.
Definitely a myth. He was not the first.
Okay, buddy.
Let's stay off Google.
Stay off the Google, buddy.
All right, Mark, I think you have one more, and this one is very contentious, especially around the local history community. I've known historians to have gotten or almost gotten into fistfights over this whole question.
Oh, yeah, man.
Yeah, this is crazy. Take it away.
You wonder. I have long thought that local historians of the olden days, the old guild, they were a little possessive of the history.
Some of them are still around. That still are, yeah.
Yeah. And they're like, for instance, I'm not going to say names, but like you read through a local bit of history from a certain time period, and they don't provide sources.
Right.
And some say, many that I've talked to, that that's a way to possess the information for themselves.
Right.
I don't know.
Makes sense.
But so this makes me wonder, the Chinese tunnel thing, is this like some big, just like, no, I know better, and no, I know better. No, right. I know better. Like pissing contest between male historians of the olden days. I don't know. But we try to do the opposite. So I really, here's the thing. If they existed, Chinese tunnels, and I know there were tunnels places. Whether they're Chinese or not is a question.
Right.
But here's the thing. It'd be cool. And if they didn't, yeah, I'd be cool with that too. So I really don't give a shit. It's all interesting to me. So I'd like to set that out there for any of our listeners. So anyway. Yeah. So why it's controversial, I don't really know. But yeah, the supposed Chinese tunnels running under the streets of Boise. Let's get to that. So let me tell you, the truth, in my opinion, and in many others, lies in the middle, like most things. What do you think, Jeff? Middle ground kind of tends to be somewhere where the truth lies. You know?
I was always told that there's 3 sides to the story: the one person side, the second person side, and then the truth, which is, like you said, somewhere in the middle.
Exactly. And so, really quickly, the Chinese, they start coming to America, in some sort of sizable numbers in the 1840s, but 1850s there are more. And then, of course, the 1860s, they came because the iron rails were being planted across the nation, right? You got the Union Pacific. You got what's the other one, damn it?
Oh, the one that no one talks about?
Yeah.
Central? What was it called? Central? Was the one that came west from California? Or, went east from California? And they met in Utah at Promontory Point?
Yeah, that one.
Yeah, that one.
What was that?
I can't remember. Again, it's not
Grand Central.
Thank you.
Is that what that is?
No.
That's a state.
That's... You're thinking New York.
Oh, dude, I should know this.
Central Pacific. Yeah, that's
there goes our credibility. But so they came to do that, and then also for Gold Mountain, right? Gold Mountain.
Yeah,
and that was pretty much anywhere where there's a lot of gold, but that was in Western United States. And why were they coming in such numbers other than those pursuits? They knew there was money, but they were also trying to get away from some pretty messed up shit there in China. It's like the southwestern region of China. Mm-hmm. And so you get, you got lots of, what's it called? The Taiping Rebellion, which makes World War I look like a tea party. Yep. But, they're getting away from that. It's the 1860s. And so they come to America and they're dealing with, disease, murder, indentured servitude, discrimination, racism, exploitation. All the building blocks of any fine nation. Yeah. But, let's be honest. But here's the thing. They did well. Not all of them, obviously, but they persevered, and they came from all the way over in China. So, you know what? Why not? But do you know of these troubles, Jeffrey?
About wars and famines and all that crap.
Not just in Ireland, right?
Yep.
Yeah, isn't that kind of crazy, though? You got Ireland, they're coming here, running away from famine and disease to experience war here. Yeah. At the same time, the Chinese are running too. That's America, right? That's the story of America. In desperate times, people come to America.
Yeah. And I think, the Chinese story echoes a lot of other migrations to the United States, to where the idea was for them to come to the U.S., work, and then send that money back home, and then hopefully return back to their homeland someday. Yeah. And a lot of them did. A lot of them did alive. A lot of them did in coffins, because, the spiritual belief was that they had to be buried back in their homeland.
Right. And just as an aside, if you go to the Morris Hill Cemetery in Boise, you got the Chinese section, which I believe is the northeast section. And it stems from when cemeteries were ethnically, racially, whatever you want to call it, religiously segregated, and a lot of those graves are empty. Yeah, the older ones for sure.
Or the Chinese cemetery down in Silver City. It's, as far as I know, it's completely empty, right?
Right, and you can barely tell where the one. You can't even find any stones marking anybody in the Idaho City one. You just know the general location, and so if they could afford to, they put everything they could into getting a person back to their province or part of China, because they're bound to wander if they're not in their home soil.
Yep.
Kind of like Dracula.
Exactly.
But not.
Speaking of soil, Mark, what are we talking about here?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Precious metals
Yes.
and Chinese people. Chinese Americans that came in mass because, to this area in 1868, right? Let's be honest. There were Chinese people here before that, but gold had been found in the Boise Basin, as we said. George Grimes, August 2nd, 1862, on Grimes Creek. And anyway, you get all these white miners, right? They're working hard, they're mining their claims, and then, they start to, in their opinion, cash out. They can go elsewhere, purchase a claim. It's not easy for the Chinese to really do that. There are laws and taxes and all those things against that. But, so, the Chinese start coming here and buying cashed out claims, and I go cashed out in quotations. But here's the thing, they came all the way from war-torn China, right? They're going to work their asses off, and they do, and they find every little speck of metal they can, precious metal that they can, and they make a living at it. And you get these miners, they set up shops, and people come that already have money, and they're merchants, and they set up shops in Idaho City, all the different cities up in the basin, and then down in Boise City, which really is a mining supply town, right? And so you start to get Chinatown 1 in downtown Boise, which was like up 7th or Capitol, and then over, down from Capitol Boulevard today over to, 9th? Down Idaho, and then a little bit down 8th Street, and in that area, that's Chinatown 1, right? And then later, because, well, it's a good spot for, business. The Chinese are kind of pushed out in 1901 to create Chinatown 2 because of fire hazards and filth. Well, let's be honest, that was true. But here's the thing.
It was also premium land.
It was also premium land, and everybody kind of had fire hazards back in the day. It was kind of something, the Chinese laundries, they had to have, fires continuously to keep the water warm. But really, it was, we want this land. We're going to concoct these stories to say, well, this area is particularly dangerous, fire prone, and disease ridden, gross, right? And so they push them out to, where Front Street is now, on Capitol, down Front Street to where 9th is Chandler Steakhouse. Some Tong War shit that happened in that area, and it's an interesting area. But these tunnels are said to, especially pockmark where old Chinatown was, but also a smattering in new Chinatown. So, have you heard all this stuff? Yeah,
most of it, yeah.
You've heard this. What do you think? I guess
about the tunnels themselves.
Yeah.
Well, Mark, it would make sense that the Chinese needed a way to get between these buildings because they were, for part of our history, not allowed to be above the surface at nighttime. So they did need to have ways to move around. So it would make definite sense that they made their way underground.
Yeah. On and off, when you had moments of disease would pop up, right? Later on, the Japanese that came to the area because of the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 okay, we can't rely on the Chinese to build our railroads for cheap now, so we can't rely on white labor. So the owners of these, Oregon Short Line is, okay, we're going to bring in Japanese workers. They would catch, what was it, some sort of, was it smallpox, or some sort of outbreak, and then the Japanese would be kicked out of one area like Nampa.
Yeah.
And then they'd go to Boise, and the Chinese would be like, no, get out of here, because they're going to blame it on us. And sure enough, they do, kind of. And so there's always these situations where it's like, oh, we got to hide away, right? And so there are hiding spaces for these Chinese merchants and population. But there was also, they were associated, these areas that were dug out under stores and buildings. Again, all merchants did it. It wasn't just something that the Chinese did, right? Saloon keepers, everybody. There are spaces in Seattle and in Boise that were vault spaces, which were underneath the sidewalks, right, that you're walking on top of. In Seattle, you can look down through some glass and you can see into the old Seattle area, right? And
not only not only do you get extra space to store your stuff, but it's also safe from fires generally, safer from, it keeps it cooler. If you want to keep something cold, you keep it underground. So yeah, you dig a hole in your basement wall and you have storage space.
So yeah, exactly. And then there was illicit activity, right? There was gambling. Oh. There was prostitution, none of which were illegal per se in the beginning. But, to get away from the tax man or those police wanting to take bribes, it was always better for the Chinese, among others, to hide their games of chance and their prostitution. But opium was not illegal to smoke until nationally it was outlawed in 1909. Oh. So up until that point, they didn't want to pay their taxes, the Chinese, on the opium. To this day, you can go to the state archives, and I've seen them. I've gone to the collection for the Tongs, or the fraternal organizations that kind of came about in the late 1860s, 70s in San Fran. But they spread, and these guys would carve, fake stamps out of wood, and then they would stamp the opium with the fake taxman stamp because it was illegal to not pay your taxes on it. You could sell it, fine. They actually, at the corner of 7th and Front, or Capitol and Front, right, there was a Josh House, which was a religious kind of, a religious structure, and behind the altar in there they would hide opium, right?
Good place for it.
Yeah, and so it was this illicit area, but basically everybody would do it. And so there was an article that was in the Daily Statesman in 1898, and it was talking about a repair wagon on 8th Street between Maine and Idaho. So think kind of like the southern section of the Boise National Bank building where Fork is, right? Well, that was the Oddfellows Hall area, and so this repair wagon fell in to kind of a pit that opened up, a fall pit or whatever. Well, it was an old opium den that had been reported on earlier. People had said, oh yeah, I went there, I remember that. But you would enter this, so the Oddfellows Hall was adjacent to where a Chinese establishment was, right?
Yeah.
And they had a secret kind of entrance that went down a ladder to an extra space that was into an opium den. You would go in there, and they had little alcoves. You would basically smoke your opium and lay in one of these little alcoves and take a little nap, chase the dragon. And this was a thing. So it was an extra little space that could be carved out, because the James Hawley Jr. was a lawyer, right? And he did an interview back, 50s or something like that, with I don't know when, but with the Idaho State Historical Society. And they asked him about, his father working with the Tongs and the different owners of properties. And he basically said he worked with them too. And he said they didn't have extensive networks of tunnels because the soil didn't support it. We would have noticed all the processed lumber they would have had to haul in.
For supports, yeah.
For supports. But what they did have was the soil was easy to carve out, right? So you could imagine sandstone, right?
Oh,
yeah. So you carve out the soil, you create an extra space for either storage or an opium smoking den. That was perfectly normal. And so that's more what we're talking about. And also, the other thing you had is you had passageways from one building to the other, because we know Angie Davis.
Yes, we do.
Yeah. We were talking, and she knows a lot of shit about Boise. Let me tell you. She knows a lot of stuff. And we were talking this, Arthur Hart, the prominent historian, one of those covetous old historians, but also very important in his own way. Totally important.
One that didn't offer his sources.
Yeah. Okay. Sometimes he did, sometimes he didn't. But he was adamant that these didn't exist. But the thing is Chinatowns were pretty central areas, right? And so their community, where passageways were necessary, a whole network of tunnels that went throughout the town were totally impractical.
Right.
And so there are a whole series of articles from 1949 where the Union Block is now. Mai Tai, right? That whole area,
yeah.
Right? That used to be a different building, a Chinese restaurant and stuff. And so when that was owned or bought by some sort of city entity, they looked into this Chinese tunnel things, and they said, again, there were storage spaces and areas where that had been created, but there were no tunnels, including, you know, that 1967 video we were talking about?
Oh, yeah.
Right?
That's a great one.
They didn't have very much sound. They found a little bit. But that was somewhere on the Front Street area, right? Mm-hmm. Across, there was a building that was torn down in, 72 or 68, something like that.
Yep.
I think it was the Hip Sing or the Hop Sing Tong Association building. Mm-hmm. Well, before they tore that down in 67, this guy with KBOI, he goes down there and he's like, oh, that's where the tunnels were.
Right.
That's what this Chinese guy who knew another Chinese American guy who died, he said it was there.
Yeah.
So, but the guy...
Case closed.
Yeah, case closed,
yeah.
Right? Oh, yeah.
Well,
but here's the thing.
Talk about this.
The transcripts say, oh, that's where it was. It's closed now. It's not there anymore. There's a wall there now.
Yeah.
But that's where it was.
Where it was, yeah.
You know, and that's the thing. Like, I think some people have said that, you know, this somewhere in this, idea of Chinese tunnels is a tinge of racism because, I don't know if that's true. Maybe to some degree it's true. You got, these secretive Chinese Tong associations. I mean, shit.
Yeah.
Big Trouble in Little China is one of my favorite fucking movies of all time. Kurt Russell. I mean, come on.
R.I.P. Kurt Russell.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Kurt Russell died?
Yeah.
What?
Did he?
Are you talking about the old one or the guy from the 80s?
Hold on.
No. Don't tell me Kurt Russell died.
No, he's still alive.
Oh, shit.
Sorry.
His dad, I think, is dead. Anyway.
Oh, I was thinking of Swayze. Sorry.
Oh, what?
Yeah.
I guess Swayze.
Yeah. There are a lot of similar movies.
Roadhouse.
Yeah.
But, so I don't know, like these mysterious Chinatowns and whatnot, but there's a reason those exist too, because it's like, well, protection of your own, only let so much in. There was some back and forth for sure between the white community in Boise and the Chinese community. But, so some of that, I can see why. And so I think in the end, right, there are some articles that said, for instance, down 8th Street again, or was it 7th? It was 7th. There was a horse sometime in the 1880s. It was pulling a wagon, and it fell into what they thought were Chinese tunnels. But what it really was a homemade sewer. Basically, the Chinese were like, hey, there are no sewers in this town. So they created their own sewers, and they would put planks down, like big, thick wood, and then cover it with dirt in their street areas. But they rotted out, and this horse fell through it. And it was full of crap and muck.
What a shitty situation.
Shitty situation for that horse.
Yep.
And so, you have all these things that allude to it. So what I think in the end is that, you had passageways.
Yeah.
But you didn't have an extensive network of tunnels. So really, it was somewhere in the middle, That's what most historians say. That's what a lot of the people from the day and age say. And, you have some people who are, we excavated this building, or we tore down this building, and, we found these passageways. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, exactly. But where the fuck did they go?
Yeah, and they weren't these extensive, it wasn't like an extensive tunnel system underneath the city of Boise, right? It was basically you're taking a foundation wall between two buildings and knocking a hole in it so you can go between these two buildings.
Yeah, two buildings, three buildings.
Four, but yeah. Through a whole block.
We're not talking about like Shanghai tunnels like in Portland or something like that. That's not what we're talking about.
Or the Pendleton Underground, stuff like that.
Yeah, well, Arthur Hart said that was bullshit.
The Underground?
Yeah.
You can go there.
Yeah, exactly.
It's a tourist thing.
I know. He's like, oh, they weren't tunnels. They weren't tunnels. And then so we get into those kind of things.
Yeah.
And if, people are like, oh, that's racist. And it's like, well, Okay, well maybe everybody used the tunnels, but they're still tunnels, and the Chinese used them. And I actually know, well, we actually know somebody whose family owns the Pendleton Underground. Natalie, Natalie, hi Natalie, if you're listening, thank you for your support. You told me once I could go to your family's tunnels.
Oh yeah, we need to go there.
Take us.
So, Mark, what really gets me is the many people who swear to God that they've been down these tunnels, yet there's no photographs, there's no videos, there's no, like, maps or anything like that. In fact, on Reddit, about a week and a half ago, I got a message from a user named the Duzzy Fuckling, which was interesting.
I kind of think that's a great name.
I don't know if I can say that on the... Anyway.
Duzzy Fuckling, yeah.
The Duzzy Fuckling. So this person said, "Hi, Jeff. I did bar security downtown for a few years, mostly at Tom Graney's. One of the tunnel entrances is in Graney's basement. There's a closet just left of the women's restroom on the right of the dance floor. One of the entrances is in there. It's ground level and only a few feet tall. There's a bunch of bar stuff in there, so they're using it as storage, obviously. The bartenders said it goes all the way to Humpin' Hannah's, but is boarded off in a few places and mostly used by businesses for storage now. They tried to explore it at some point, but couldn't get very far."
Okay, get my ass in there, and you too, buddy.
Exactly. It's like, if these tunnels exist, why can't someone with a video camera go down there?
Okay, where's Tom Graney's?
I have no idea.
Okay, because I know Humpin' Hannah's. I know where that is. So it's like, how far away is Tom Graney's? That's the question. Because, again, passageways. I think this guy stumbled upon passageways until you walk that fucker on your own. I think, you don't know for sure, right? And even if you did, depending on the distance, I don't believe that this huge, extensive network existed.
So it's in the 100 block of 6th.
Okay, so it's pretty close.
Yeah,
that's right. Yeah. Okay, Tom Graney's is near where the old Idaho Statesman building is from 1910. Then you get the seafood restaurant there, and you get Tom Graney's. Oh, yeah, I've been there. Okay. Oh, dude, exactly. So it's connected via these old buildings. So passageways.
Passageways, yeah.
Yeah, not so tunnel. I mean, I guess it's like, it could be one or the other. It could be true. Yeah, they were tunnels. They were passageways. But not like, it's not like fucking the Goonies down there, with One-Eyed Willie and the fucking thing, right. I mean, so what's the truth? So I guess this could be both. I don't know.
Yeah, a little bit of both. Yeah.
All right.
But, Nampa has similar stories of tunnels systems underneath downtown Nampa. And, I talked about this a little bit on my tour, and there's actually a story. We talked about Chief Nampa and Fred Mock. Fred Mock talks about during the 1909 Great Nampa Fire how he saw a group of Chinese basically burned to death in one of these tunnels. Well, the tunnel wasn't excavated when they rebuilt the block, so it could be very well that there's some Chinese people down there underneath.
I believe in this Chinese tunnel debate. Just to end my part, it's to show how interesting and curious humans can be, but also how stupid.
Exactly.
Because here's the thing, it's kind of both. And I think in most things where we debate and argue to no end in the United States, it's kind of both. You know.
So there's definitely something to it, but it's not what people say.
Yeah.
And I think if people were to kind of talk about it, they'd probably understand it a little bit better and know it. And
also, don't just be like, "Oh, hey man, this fucking guy told me when I was drunk, and I'm over here, and this fucking guy told me that some dead Chinese fella told him." Read a book, find a map, go to the archives. Let's figure it out together.
Yep.
But exactly. It's in the middle.
All right. I think with that, Mark, we're gonna go ahead and sign this off, and we'll be back next week to talk about prostitution. How about that?
You better sign this off, buddy, because you're signing me on, baby.
Signing off.
What does that mean?
Right. I have no idea.
Just cut it.
All right. With that, we're going to hand it over to Tom, and have a good one.
All right.
right, Mark. Thank you. Damn it. All right, Mark. We got one final myth to cover tonight, and that is that Idaho doesn't exist. You got 30 seconds. What's your take?
It exists because, like, it's recognized by, like, the government, and, like, we live in these borders and whatnot.
You know, Mark, I've lived, here my whole life here in Idaho, and I've studied it extensively, and I have to tell you, the answer to this one is that